Well, it's all over now, taking you off the air. It's the end of the show for Stevie Colbert. Yeah, it's on now, quitting time his hair. It's the end of the show for Stevie Colbert. The end of the show for Stevie Colbert.
So one of the big pieces of news out right now and controversies in a world of endless controversies is the cancellation of Late Show with Stephen Colbert. This is being spun in all different directions by, the different political sides. On the one side, we have, the left, the liberals, the progressives saying, he was forced out because Paramount, CBS were bowing to Trump, and they want this big merger to go through, and so they gave him this on the sacrificial altar, and Trump will now give them permission to go through with this big merger, and that this is some form of censorship of free expression. On the other side, with people saying no, this was just because Colbert isn't funny anymore, and so he was canceled because people weren't watching his show because he wasn't that funny. And of course, making this a little more complicated, you have Trump on social media saying that this was CBS bowing to him, that Jimmy Kimmel will be next, throwing some red meat to his fan base, to his followers. Become a fan base rather than like a political base when it comes to Trump. Because it's more like that than a traditional political base. And honestly, it's kind of all of the above. I mean, if we're being honest about this situation, it really is all of the above. Colbert has not been that funny for a long time. And I thought about actually starting this video out by saying that Colbert was in fact canceled 11 years ago when he left the Colbert Report. Because that's really, if we're being honest, or at least, if I'm being honest, if I want to talk about my own personal opinion about Stephen Colbert, he seems like a really nice guy. I love that he's a huge Tolkien nerd. I love that he clearly didn't like Rings of Power. He's very smart. He's erudite. He's well-spoken. He seems like a really nice guy. But he hasn't been very funny, really, honestly, since the Colbert Report. And I thought he was very funny on that show. And I worried at the time that this was a huge mistake from a more, I guess, artistic standpoint. It was probably the right move from a career standpoint because, obviously he was making a lot more money doing the Late Show than he ever was doing the Colbert Report, and which was reaching a larger audience as well. But sometimes the quantity of your audience is less important than the quality of your audience or the quality of the thing you're doing, right? I mean, we can look at all kinds of things. Some of the biggest YouTubers in the world have terrible content that appeals to the lowest common denominator. But the thing is, the Colbert Report was a funny show. I mean, back in the day, I really enjoyed how he was able to skewer right-wing ideologues and blowhards with such a fun way. We've lost that ability to have like fun political commentary, I feel like, or satire outside of like South Park, that very few people really do that well anymore. But Colbert was able to sort of lampoon the Bill O'Reillys of the world in a way that was never necessarily vicious and mean-spirited, but was very funny and on point. You really, I don't know, he really inhabited that character, the Stephen Colbert character, so well. And that died when he left that show and took the CBS show. Really, the Stephen Colbert that anyone actually cared about was gone. I don't mean that no one cares about the real person, but as far as like a public presence, as far as like his comedy was concerned, that was over and done with. And his heyday of skewering George W. Bush during the White House Correspondents' Dinner and his time on The Daily Show, all of that just died over a decade ago. And it's unfortunate because I think probably there was space in the Trump years for that character to say his piece, and I wish he hadn't gone that route. Honestly, Jon Stewart would have been a much more sensible choice for CBS because he already did The Daily Show, and he was good at that. But again, really hasn't done anything worthwhile since. He had a show, his own show. I can't remember what Jon Stewart's show was even called. It was canceled after 2 seasons because it was just terrible. And honestly, really didn't feel like Jon Stewart's brand of comedy or commentary, but rather this something trying to appeal to a younger, woker generation. And you just can't fake it. You can't fake it. People can smell the bullshit, you know? Anyways, why was The Late Show with Stephen Colbert canceled? Was it because Trump pressured that cancellation? Was it because Colbert was not funny anymore? Was it because CBS was losing $40 million a year? Yes, to all of those things, but also because the late shows, all of them, are declining. It's dinosaur television. These are not shows that young people in the demo watch. The demo being the demographic of viewers between 18 and 49 years old. I'm rapidly approaching the day when I am no longer part of the demo. But I think that also advertisers are going to have to rethink that age group, because I think that as lifespans increase, and also a lot of people who grew up, you know, in my generation age, we're still going to be part of that demo in our 50s. So I think that's going to have to shift, but maybe it won't. But I'm on a sidebar here. Late night shows are on the decline. I mean, just like so much of traditional TV has been on the decline for years, this has been the case for late night. And you know, the numbers between Johnny Carson saw compared to what Colbert. I mean, he was getting millions more viewers a night than any of these, than Fallon, than Kimmel, than any of these late show guys, and even Jay Leno and whatnot. They were getting far higher viewership, and that's just the nature of the beast. Not only the cable cutting, which saw the decline of traditional TV and the move to streaming, but also this kind of content is more consumed on social media, on TikTok clips, on Twitter. Sorry, X. I'm never going to get used to that. I think Elon Musk's next big social media site should be XX, and then he can come up with a full video site, just video content, XXX. And that would, yeah, anyways. It's just dying, regardless of how funny Colbert is or isn't. It's dying. And I absolutely believe that it was losing $40 million a year, because the declining viewership was not also seeing a decline in budget. I mean, Colbert was earning $15 to $20 million a year. There were around 200 staffers on this show, and they had to rent a space in Manhattan. All of that, 200 staffers making good money, each of them, not all equal, but good money, plus that very expensive rental for the TV studio, plus any other expenses that they would acquire, bringing people in, and a band, the whole production, easily $100 million a year, right? And since the viewership numbers were going down and advertising dollars were draining out, it's going to see a huge loss. Even if Colbert had been very funny, I mean, I guess you could say if he was funny enough, maybe the viewership wouldn't decline. But I think since this is a structural decline, something that's taking place across the industry and across late night, I don't think that even a much funnier Colbert would have seen the numbers to keep that in the green. So that was going into the red. All right, there's a very funny quote I want to read from this Substack. Jeff Maurer. I'm saying his name wrong for sure. But he's got a good piece on this, but he says, in TV, if you're making money, you could wave your genitals at the Pope while high on crack, and the network will loudly defend your right to free expression. But if you're losing money, it's like a quiet place. Make any noise at all, and you'll be whisked away to instant death. I think that really sums it up nicely. Because it's possible also that if Kamala Harris had been elected, that this show wouldn't have been canceled right now, because it's very possible that CBS and Paramount, who are being sued by Donald Trump, were already considering the cancellation, but then used this as a bargaining chip with Trump to help settle this whole thing. You know, give him what he wants, something that you didn't even want that much yourself anymore because it was such a money pit. You give him, he's happy, you placate the president, and you get rid of this pesky show and this annoying host who's causing all kinds of trouble for the suits. Is that quelling of free speech? Well, it's not like Trump actually got the government to stop Colbert from saying what he's going to say. So no, not really. But is it a little troubling to have a president bullying news outlets and entertainers and making threats and using his bully pulpit to create a sense that there are consequences for free speech? Yeah, I think that is troubling. And I think in the end, I think a lot of people, I think everybody kind of walks away from this looking bad, because I think Trump looks bad being a bully. It's not my style. I'm sorry. I think that you got to take your lumps. If people are mocking you on late night, you just take your lumps. You don't get your panties in a bunch over this, right? I think the left looks bad because really part of the problem with comedy these days is that you can't be funny anymore because you're just risking offending everyone all the time. And I'm not saying or suggesting that the only funny comedy or humor is one that offends people, but if you're getting lambasted by critics and viewers, and young people can't watch your show because you're too edgy, or you say something that could be construed as offensive to any of the numerous categories of people that you're no longer allowed to make fun of, well, yeah, that's going to hurt comedy. So people aren't going to watch anymore because it's boring. It lacks any sort of bite. I think that Colbert looks bad. Because I don't think Colbert has been a particularly, not like I've watched a lot. Here's the thing. I watched a lot of the Colbert Report because it was quite good. But I don't watch late night. I've never really watched late night. And when I've tuned in and have watched some of his, it's really quite boring for the most part. There, with exceptions, obviously, he's had his funny bits but overall, like Colbert's indignance at all of this, well, I can't really blame him for it. I don't think, positioning yourself, I don't think celebrities positioning themselves as part of some kind of resistance to Trump is a particularly good look. It comes off as very smug. And it's sort of the flip side of the MAGA coin, as you know, probably. I am no fan of MAGA. I'm no fan of Trump. But I think that the reaction to Trump has often been equally ridiculous. Maybe not as dangerous, depending on how you view the political fallout of Trump's various decisions, but ridiculous. People who go full anti-Trump often make themselves look bad in the process, because again, in this conversation between these two sides of radically motivated fans of very different political ideologies, you often just have a lot of people sounding like idiots. And Colbert went really hard into the anti-Trump thing, and that was good for ratings for a while. It couldn't stop the tide. It couldn't change the inevitable future of what was happening to late night, but it was good for ratings for a while. But in the process, I don't think Colbert changed his views. He's always been on the left. But in the process, he made his show a very politically charged one. Whereas in the past, late night shows have not been extremely politically one-sided necessarily. And I think there's another really good quote that I wanted to draw your attention to. But over at Ethan Strauss's Substack, he quotes Johnny Carson, who is being interviewed about political stances. And he said, that's a danger. That's a real danger. Once you start that, you start to get that self-important feeling that what you say has great import. And strangely enough, you could use that show as a forum. You could sway people, and I don't think you should as an entertainer. So that's really interesting for a couple of reasons. First of all, he's not saying that you'll fail because of this. He's saying that you may sway people, and that as an entertainer, it's not really your job to sway people politically. And I think that's very wise, actually, because I think there are so many celebrities who, over the last decade, have gotten very vocal politically, and obviously there have always been political activists who are also celebrities. I guess I have more respect for people who actually live the activist lifestyle. They're rich and famous, but they go out to protests and they get arrested and they do that stuff. At least they're walking the walk. But a lot of these people just, they just have a lot of followers, so they can say whatever they want, or they can make some cringy video with other fellow celebrities, and they don't actually. Who knows how much they even believe? They're just super rich people who think their opinion matters more because they're celebrities, and they don't. But also, yeah, I guess that feeds into the next bit, that self-important feeling, and I think that's something that you could also call smugness. South Park did a great episode many years ago about the cloud of smug coming out of Los Angeles, and it's been a long time since I've seen it, but that self-important feeling, I think that is such a huge motivating force for so many people, whether they're celebrities or whether they just make a splash on Twitter or go viral for some reason, or they join a dog pile of somebody. And, it's almost similar to bloodlust. You really see that in the cancel culture that was so prevalent for a while there, and still is to some degree. But this idea that, like, we are the just, we are, and I see this on the right and the left. I see this in groups. The self-important feeling isn't just for people like Colbert who have a platform, but in groups where there's this idea that we are righteous and our enemies are vile and deplorable, and we feel really good about ourselves for whatever we can do to harm them, usually rhetorically, but sometimes this actually boils over into violence, as we've seen. But it's unhealthy, and I think what's really exhausting for me, even though I love talking about politics and I love engaging in these discussions of the culture war, and I like being a critic of how these aspects of our society, filter into our entertainment, into our TV shows, into our movies, into our video games, and into our discourse. I get exhausted just by the sheer quantity of it. Everybody's political now, but very few people have any kind of real political depth. It's just all on the surface now. So many people, down to, I was so struck by talking with my kids during the last election and during the years leading up to that, during the Biden years, because they had become teenagers or adolescents. They were, and they were very, they would come home talking about how, there were kids in their class that were Trumpers, and there were kids in their class that were, liberals, and there was I go back to when I was in high school. And sure, that was, I remember the Bill Clinton Monica Lewinsky scandal going on, and some of the other political controversies of the time, which were magnified by, the rise of the 24-hour talk radio and cable news and all that stuff. This, obviously long before social media was a thing. And, sure, I bet that some kids in my class were, Bill Clinton fans, and other kids were not, and I'm sure some were conservative and some were liberal, but honestly, we just didn't talk about it. We didn't talk about it, and we very rarely, I was not that political, just at all. I had my views, but they were still forming, and I guess I wasn't that in a hurry to be a liberal or a conservative at the time. That all sort of came later for me and for a lot of people that I knew. And I think that this is kind of not confined just to politics, but to so many things in life right now, to identity. Again, I don't think people were nearly as obsessed with being part of, we were part of groups, right? Theater kids, goth kids, just, the whole Breakfast Club thing, that's always been the thing. Identity's always been important. But now, people talk about mental health stuff so much. And I don't think it's wrong to talk about mental health, but I think we've almost weaponized the language of mental health and given people all this anxiety over their anxiety. Like, there's something to be said for a world where we don't dwell so much on our mental health or the president or our politics, right? Where we can engage in different ways, because this shit filters into everything. Every time I write my Superman review, when I made a video for Superman and I wrote a review in Forbes, the reaction I got to this wasn't like sane at all. Like, people were mad at me, not just for not liking this movie, but because of all the things that they assumed about me for not liking this movie. That I was anti-immigration, that I was a pro-Trump voter, that I was a Nazi, or my favorite still, that I had anti-Superman ideology. Whatever that means. So many assumptions because I didn't like a movie. It's crazy, but that's kind of where we've gotten, and it doesn't help that so much of our like identity politics have entered into entertainment, and been forced from on high into the entertainment and media we consume. Right? It doesn't help that so much of that is now part of what we watch and consume, because now people are just getting more and more wired. And who does this benefit? This is the question that I keep asking, because I'm sorry, like, these big executives, these rich corporate suits, these investment funds, all this money that's going into DEI stuff, or that was, and this has started to dry up. They don't give a shit. These people don't care about minorities or women. They just don't. Come on, they're vampires, man. They don't give a shit. So who does it benefit? And I would say, I guess this is a fairly left-wing critique. I would say that division benefits the rich and powerful. That the more divisive we become, the more divisive our media and the commentary around our entertainment and our lives in general becomes, the more the rich and powerful benefit. And people, you and me, do not. We become part of these very vicious tribes. We become part of these very negative, toxic groups that hate these other groups, right? Oh, you're woke. Oh, you're anti-woke. We hate. It's the 2 minutes hate, man. George Orwell was right. It's just not 2 minutes. It's 24/7. And this is my project, I think. And it may, again, I even more often than being called a Trumper or a Nazi, I'm called a fence sitter or a centrist. I don't buy those terms. I don't think I'm a centrist. I don't think I'm a moderate. I think I just don't like this binary. I don't like this dichotomy we've created. I don't like to have to belong to a group in order to have thoughts and opinions on political and social ideas, or TV shows or movies. I don't like to have to be boxed in. If I have a critique of, say, trans rights activists, I don't want to be lumped in with deeply transphobic people. If I have a critique of how diversity is handled in The Rings of Power or Vikings Valhalla or any number of shows, I don't want to be immediately boxed in with the racists. If I think that we should have a social democratic system where more of our safety nets are available to more people, and that we should try to do whatever we can to lift up the poor, I don't want to be boxed in with the ultra woke campus crusaders. Like, these are complicated issues. All of these are. And I think that they require nuance. And I think that what we've seen with the rise of social media in particular, but beginning long before that, is a war against nuance. And one of the best ways to kill nuance and to kill independent thinking and to kill critical thinking and critical analysis is to create divisiveness and consequences for having those thoughts. And social pressure is one of the best levers of consequence that exists outside of, actual like legal consequences, right? If you're a journalist who wants you to keep your job and your status among, other journalists, and you go on Twitter and you during the BLM days, you critique the BLM movement, you may lose it all, your reputation, your job. And some of those people who did that ended up getting what we've called red pilled, right? Driven over to the right. But of course, on the right, there exists its own cancel culture, its own forbidden, thoughts and beliefs. Although in recent years, the left has become much more intellectually authoritarian, I believe. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because the right has its own set of villains, right? And there's a great bit, and I'm sure I've shown it before, but John Cleese of Monty Python has this whole bit on extremism. And he says the great thing about extremism is it gives you enemies, right? And that's what we've seen happen. Enemies. So many enemies we have now. It's not just that the left has Trump and that the left has, Republicans to be enemies. They also have all the heretics in their own midst, and even worse enemies in a lot of ways. And the right has their own heretics, right? I mean, there was a whole time when we used the term rhino all the time, Republican in name only. And then, of course, Cleese's conclusion is that everybody hates moderates. Which is, but I don't know. I don't know if people hate moderates or if moderates don't do enough to light their fire, right? I mean, there's a reason, there's a lot of reasons why I'm not, I don't have 400,000 Twitter followers and 1 million YouTube subscribers. Partly that's my own fault because I am a very private person and I don't get on Twitter that much, and I am terrible at consistency making YouTube videos, and I stick to myself. But part of that is also that I'm just not going to be that extremist who's saying the things that could drive, huge gains in followers. For one thing, I've always been terribly frightened by the idea of audience capture, where your audience expects one thing out of you, and if you do something else, that they all just leave. I mean, I'd rather have a smaller audience, a smaller following of open-minded people who are willing to engage in a conversation and disagree with me, but not disagree with me and then just be like, I'm not following you because you didn't like Superman, or I'm not following you because you don't like Zack Snyder, or I don't, whatever. I mean, I'd honestly rather have Trump followers who are okay with me not liking Trump than people who I agree with more politically who will stop following me because I defend Trump for something that I think he did right, if that makes sense. And I've wandered far afield now. I have moved far past the conversation around Colbert, but I think it all does tie back to this, which is that when Colbert was making the Colbert Report, the left was a very different beast. You could be funny back then without getting canceled immediately. And the right was not cool at all. George W. Bush era Republicans were seen as stuffy, censorious, old warmongers. But men have been drifting, in particular, men have been drifting over to the right because, I'm sorry, if you want to capture the 18 to 49, especially male demographic, you just can't act this way. You can't constantly be talking about how terrible men are. You can't quit making entertainment products for men. Like, and we've talked about this with Star Wars, Marvel. You can't just stop making the things that men want to watch and then be like, why aren't they watching it anymore? Why aren't they voting for Democrats anymore? When Democrats have been telling men how terrible they are for years and years and years. I wanted to make a video about the show Adolescence because that was a really interesting and well-made show that sort of explored what the radicalization of young men by like the pickup artist crowd or the men's rights crowd could do theoretically, and has done with some young men. Because I think that one thing missing from that critique is not just what the men's rights activist movement can do negatively, but how the other side is pushing young men towards it. When you tell young men that women would rather be alone in the woods with a fucking bear than with a man, how does that resonate with young men? I mean, probably not too great, right? And then the response to that is, well, do better. But then the response to that is that all men are bad and dangerous. And there's this horrible, vicious cycle of telling men that they are bad, dangerous, that they owe so much for the sins of their fathers. And there's no real path to redemption there. So the only path, there's two paths, sorry. Neither of them are to redemption. One is to become an ally, where you see these guys on Twitter and writing their op-eds and making their videos where they're just the male feminist type, where, they try to set themselves apart from other men. That all men are bad, they say, implying that all men but me are bad, right? I am holy and righteous. I am part of the good, but all other men are bad. And then the other path is towards the arms of people telling you that that men's rights are, being abused, and that you should, and it gets more and more radical as you go. Personally, I reject these paths for so many reasons, but I'm rambling. So I'm going to stop talking now. I think I'll just sum things up real quick by saying that I think Colbert was canceled because late night is on the out, and the timing was simply too good for Paramount to pass up. They could use this as a political chip with Trump, and it's a win-win situation for both CBS and the Trump administration. It's not a win-win situation for the world. I don't love the death of late night, even though it wasn't my thing, really. I just don't love how everything's becoming so fragmented. I miss the days when we all watched an episode of Game of Thrones together and then talked about it afterwards. And then a week later, and everybody tuned in. We're losing something of that public space, right? The water cooler space. And not just in terms of, shows like Lost or Walking Dead or whatever we all used to watch together, but just experiencing culture together and being part of a community. I feel like that is being destroyed on so many fronts. And it's all with this identity politics and this divisiveness and this constant need for schadenfreude. And it is all very troubling to me. Yes, it's very troubling. And this is just one casualty in a larger and sort of impossible to pin down battle for, I guess, the future of humanity. And maybe I'm being doom and gloomy here. Maybe we'll be just fine. Maybe this is the conversation that every generation has. Maybe I'm an old man shaking my fist at the clouds. Damn kids these days. But I don't blame the kids. The kids didn't make this world. They're coming into this world. They were given iPads when they were 2. They were raised on Bluey and TikTok videos and access to the weirdest pornography you can find. It really is. It's really something. I miss the 90s. Maybe I'm just consumed with nostalgia. Anyways, let me know what you think in the comments. Be sure to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. Peace.
Well, it's all over now, taking you off the air. It's the end of the show for Stevie Colbert. Yeah, it's on now, quitting time is here. It's the end of the